Hello, my beautiful humans, and welcome to the Becoming Human 2.0 Unscripted podcast. I am your host, Paul McFadden, and it's my mission to create global impact by cultivating real connection through having authentic conversations that matter. Today, I'm joined by my guest, Cari Rickabaugh, another exceptional human being residing in Sheboygan, Wisconsin, USA. In this episode, we discuss healing through connection, massage therapy, trauma, and energy work. And of course, this conversation was completely unscripted. Here's a quick peek and then we'll jump right into the conversation, so enjoy. And remember, we're all here to discover, awaken, and evolve together.
That the American Institute for Stress said that 75 to 90% of all diseases and or visits to your primary care physician are rooted in our inability to manage the stress response.
Yes.
Right.
Yes, absolutely.
And there's been research that the AMA's even published back in 2014, 15 about that time frame, that 60% of our diseases were probably rooted in stress. And I would say, well, that's probably a larger number than what you're presenting. But yeah, what are we going to do about it?
Right.
Right. And I don't know if you're familiar with the Heart Math Institute. I love the work and research that they've been doing there, because in my mind, they've really changed the definition of stress and stressors. And it's a very simple shift. It's a mindset shift. It's stop calling it stress and call it what it really is.
Yeah.
Let's increase our vocabulary around what we're experiencing and what we're feeling. But then it's also a cultural shift too, because many people don't talk about their feelings.
It's so true. It's so true. To do this work, you really have to be open and you have to allow for some things that are considered frou-frou from time to time, only because that's the way to tap in to.
And hello, Cari, all the way from Sheboygan, Wisconsin. Cari, how are you doing today?
I'm fabulous, Paul. Thank you.
That's amazing. Amazing. Thank you for raising your hand to be on the show. When I first put this out there in the ether, 150 people raised their hand immediately. And I was like, whoa, figure out how to rein that in and manage to navigate that. But here we are. But as everyone knows, this is an unscripted podcast, so we're going to jump right into a conversation. And I want to go deep. And certainly there's a lot going on in the world. I know you have your areas of the focus, and I know there's things that you're passionate about. And maybe that's the first question really, is to ask you that. What is Cari passionate about today?
Cari is really passionate about service and about helping people. I've been a massage therapist for 23 years, and I am not really the kind of massage therapist that's what I say a fluff and buff massage therapist. So if you're playing music and they're relaxing and that's not the kind of massage therapist I am. I'm like, give me some problem, give me some issue, and let's fix it. Not necessarily fix it, but let's work on it. Let's get you moving forward in a way that progressively you're going to be better, instead of just feeling better for an hour or two and then have the old same things come back. And what I've found with that is a lot of the times that is due to trauma. People hold stuff inside of them, and it's due to trauma. So in the last few years, I've also become a life and trauma resolution coach. And I do those separately and I do those together. So
that's amazing. So I'm going to say the healer archetype, right? And looking at ways to help people improve their situation versus, there is a thing, obviously, you need to go get a massage. You want to feel good.
Yeah.
But you do want to address the challenge that you are having. It could be something physical, like you strained yourself. It could be, just from lifting weights, or it could be that you're holding some trauma in there, right? And it's showing up as discomfort, and I say discomfort in the body,
It-
and you're really looking at wanting to heal that with individuals. So there's more going on in the conversation and thinking about what this particular therapy looks like and how am I going to serve you. Am I capturing that?
Absolutely. I mean, you summed it up
Yeah,
perfectly.
that's awesome. That's
Yeah.
awesome. So was that something you always known you wanted to do? Or how did you come to massage therapy? But then, there's trauma work too. So tell me that progression.
So I've known since I was about probably 18, okay, which is 30 years ago. Somebody mentioned it to me and it just kind of clicked. And I was like, yes, massage therapy is what I want to do. I didn't know a lot about it, but it was something that just the thought of it resonated with me to help people feel better. It's the generic understanding of you just relax and you feel good.
Mm.
And I've actually over the years trained in 42 different modalities within massage. And so I kind of pick and choose from different modalities. Some of that is energy work, some of it is hands-on, some of it is like integral training of the muscles and the tissue. And as I've done it through the years, I was doing it full time for quite a long time. And I found that so many times people would come in and they would say, oh, my shoulder hurts. But we'd work on the shoulder and the shoulder wouldn't get better. And we'd find out that it was something in the knee that was throwing their proprioception off in their body and they were compensating. And then there were times where I'd work on people and it was just this emotional, they were able to let things go. They were able to release things that they had been holding on to for years just from a basic massage. And so that I did for many, many years. And that was my way of serving and helping to heal people. And then about 2.5 years ago, I started working with a coach. I have a lot of trauma from my life starting when I was very, very young. And some of it I remembered and some of it I didn't. And I had been to 3 different therapists who hadn't been able to help me at all. And they were all like, 12 weeks, you'll be good. We'll just talk about it. And I'm like, 12 weeks, this is 30 years of trauma. And so a friend of mine convinced me to work with his friend who was a coach. He had a very unorthodox method. He did a lot of somatic and neurolinguistic programming. And so he was, over about a year, he was able to help me really figure out how to let go of this trauma, how to process it and release it. Cause I didn't know that I could let go. I always thought I had to hold on to everything. And so that just healing that trauma helped heal for me physically fibromyalgia. It helped heal chronic fatigue. It helped heal epilepsy that they could never find why I started having as an adult. And so that's where the connection of the body, there's a book out there called The Body Keeps the Score. And that's where the connection for me came from of, oh, I'm holding all this and it's manifesting in physical ways. So then I went into coaching as well and do trauma resolution just from my experience of trauma resolution. I do somatic work, I do energy work, I do neurolinguistic programming. And then if it's somebody who's local, and sometimes I do travel around the US and have people fly in and we'll do combinations of both in one session. So
Yeah, wow. There's a lot there. You actually bring me to something I posted today on Facebook. I post quotes every day, and I said that when we are physically working out, typically we'll go lift heavy weights, and then we put them back down, and we do that on
yes,
repeat. And I said, but isn't that the metaphor for life? Like you're telling the story you just told us. We lift things that are heavy, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. But many times we don't put the weight down. We carry it with us.
I love that.
And we don't realize how that's impacting us. And it's like, what are you carrying? What are you picking up and carrying right now that you need to put back down?
Yeah.
Because when we do it physically, we know we put weight down and we get stronger. We lift it and put it down, lift it and put it down, and we get stronger. But the other stuff, we hold on to it. It's crazy. Like when I think about it, and what you just shared was like, wow, that's the perfect example of what that looks like. And so, one, thank you for sharing that story. But two, wow, and that just came to me today. So you saying this right now, literally, serendipitous. I don't know what to call it, but it's like, wow, where did that come from? That story just came from, wow. Okay. I'm listening.
I'll tell you another story of how
Mm.
the body keeps the score is I don't know if you've ever heard of the Ultimate Experience that's held in Arizona every year, and then they have ones around the world every year as
Mhm.
well. And that happened not this past weekend, but the weekend before. And the first one of those that I went to was a year ago, and it was the first time I'd ever been to an experience like that. I'd Anytime I had been around a huge group of people, I think there were 250 people at last year's, where everybody is all about self-awareness and all about self-improvement in terms
Mm.
of what are we holding on to and how do we let that go and who are we being? Very much about the being movement in our own lives. And there was at one point on the first day of the event where I walked out into the courtyard and I felt this weight just lift off my shoulders. And
Mm.
it like this realization came in, like things finally clicked regarding this one thing I had been holding bitterness and anger about for 20 years. And it was so extreme the letting go that I didn't even attend the event the next day because my gallbladder decided to purge itself. And then I learned later that the gallbladder is where you hold bitterness and anger. And I was like, oh, okay, that makes
Yeah.
sense. And this
Mhm.
year, there was I was like actually able to speak on stage this year and was told a lot, was able to share a lot of that. And then the next day, somebody called me up on stage and they were able to give so much more love and appreciation and have the room. And it was amazing experience. And everybody was like, I would have just opened up and let everything go and been cleansed. And I'm like, nope, I got to compartmentalize it because I've learned that my body will not manually, metaphysically release it and it will manifest
Mhm.
it. And so it was great and I received a lot, but I put up a wall and said, I can
Mhm.
only receive so much. And I flew home a couple of days later and I woke up the next morning with pink eye in both eyes, a sinus infection, and an upper respiratory infection. Because
Wow.
once I had come home, I finally was like, okay, I can start releasing now. And for me, it's just because I've held it on in so long, it just manifests itself physically. And a lot of times people are getting sick. A lot of times people are having these health issues that doctors are like, we don't know where they come from. I
Mhm.
didn't start having seizures till I was 20 and they could never find the cause of it. They're like, this isn't normal unless you have a brain tumor, a head injury. I'm like, nope, none of this. And once the trauma started getting cleared, the seizures quit happening.
Wow.
And so
Mhm.
it's just amazing how the body stores everything and how setting it down, you can physically feel better. You can physically feel lighter. It's incredible.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, I've been in that research for at least a decade, and it's really interesting how people are very quick, and I don't and I hate to generalize, but I'm gonna
Me
say
too.
it seems that people are very quick to want to reduce the experience that we're having due to something physical and be completely dismissive around the emotional experience that we have,
Yeah.
unless we're dealing with someone with trauma. But then at the same token, even the trauma research and the trauma treatments, we've had psychologists and psychiatrists for, I don't know, for at least 100 years, a century, maybe two
Right.
centuries, right? So you've had that. But it's because we told the lie and said Descartes cut the head off the body, and then therefore we didn't really tell the complete story about Descartes. We just kind of said he cut the head off the body; it's his fault. It's like, well, there's a reason why all that happened, and tell the whole story. Don't tell half of it. But yet, when we look at medicine today, and this is one of the main reasons why I became a functional medicine health coach, was because I felt like with allopathic medicine, we are very quick to diagnose symptoms and say, okay, these are the things, and we're going to treat these symptoms, and then we treat the symptoms, whatever your condition is, it'll go away. Now, in fairness, I've been doing this for a while now, so I have a sister who was a physician. I do know that there are, allopathic doctors that have gone down some paths to explore some alternative treatments and will recommend some alternative treatments for conditions that they don't know the root cause of. And so they're open to doing a little bit more of that. But typically, at least in the United States, and I'll speak for that, the
Right.
AMA has been very much against alternative approaches to medicine for over 50 years. I mean, this has been a 50, almost 60-year battle with getting recognition for being able to address certain conditions and situations with an alternative approach. And I can tell you that a lot of the stuff that we're experiencing, whether it's disease or whether it's something autoimmune, it's usually tied back to something emotional, some emotional trauma
It's so
that
true.
has not been resolved.
So,
And and the crazy thing is we know that.
yeah.
I mean, this is the thing. We know that. And I would say we know that innately through our own personal experiences, but I also know that the American Institute for Stress and the AMA have put out research papers in the past that would say that, like, that the American Institute for Stress said that, what is it, 75 to 90% of all diseases and or visits to your primary care physician are rooted in our inability to manage the stress response.
Yes.
Right.
Yes, absolutely.
And there's been research that the AMA's even published back in 2014, 15 about that time frame, about that 60% of our diseases were probably rooted in stress. And I would say, well, that's probably a larger number than what you're presenting. But yeah, what are we going to do about it? You
Right.
know,
Right.
and I don't know if you're familiar with the Heart Math Institute. I love the
Oh, yeah.
work and research that they've been doing there, because in my mind, they've really changed the definition of stress and stressors. And it's a very simple shift. It's a mindset shift. It's stop calling it stress and call it what it really is.
Yeah.
Let's increase our vocabulary around what we're experiencing and what we're feeling. But then it's also a cultural shift too, because many people don't talk about their feelings.
It's so true. It's so true. To do this work, you really have to be open and you have to allow for some things that are considered frou-frou from time to time, only because that's the way to tap in to what's
Mhm.
there. And as a society, we've put walls up against that and said, this is ABC is how you do it. And there's so many options out there. There's so many different abilities that we have to access. And it's not all just A, B, and C. A lot of times, I mean, I used to work at the Medical College of Wisconsin years ago, and I was a standardized patient, which is basically a fake patient. They give you a script of some ailment, and what you have to do is you have to act this out. And the students come in and they have to try and figure out what it is that you're acting out. And so many times I was like, why are we putting a band-aid on a broken leg? Like, why are we just giving you something to numb it or giving you, and let's heal it. Let's actually heal it. And the word disease, like when I saw it broken down for the first time as dis-ease, I
Mhm.
was like, that's exactly what it is. It's not necessarily an ailment. It's something that we're uncomfortable with and we're compensating some way, shape, or form, either mentally, physically, emotionally. We are compensating. Let's work through this and figure out what the root cause is.
Exactly. And that's one of the reasons why I became a functional medicine health coach.
Mhm.
I went to what's called the Integrative Healthcare Symposium. It's held in New York every year. I want to say January, February time frame. And there you'll get a mix of mostly functional medicine, naturopathic doctors and
It,
practitioners, but you do get a couple allopathic doctors there. One of the more famous ones, David Perlmutter, and you may know his name, but there's a
yeah,
bunch of folks that are there. And they talk about the state of medicine and state of healthcare globally. And it was really interesting to be sitting in the room and hearing this discussion and looking around and thinking like, where are the other doctors, the other medical doctors, the other MDs? But there were a handful of MDs in this. That was surprising.
that was
But
wonderful.
how much of that information does not get out to, I want to say, general population of folks, right? It's not like it's depending on where you live and, what city you're in, what town you're in, and what part of the country, and you may not have access to any of that information.
Right. Right. Absolutely. Absolutely.
And so one of the reasons, and I thought about that, is just kind of what you were saying. It's like, whoa, what is functional medicine? We really get down to root cause. And that was really attractive to me because I've watched family members with diabetes. I've watched family members with cancer. I've watched family members with high blood pressure. I've watched friends and other colleagues, people that I work with, drop dead at age 40, for no reason. They're doing everything right. They got the
Right.
physical regimen, they got the nutrition on point. And it's like, well, how did that person just have a heart attack in the middle of this new employee seminar?
Right.
And it came down to working 60, 70 hours a week, not being able to manage the anxiety and all the frustrations and I'm going to say, micro stressors that we experience on a day in and day out basis. Those things add up. And we can kind of get stuck in that whole cycle of it, which, I think people innately know that. But when we get stuck in the frustration or the anxiety, it turns into a disorder. And then we start thinking about, well, what are the medicines we can give you to manage the disorder versus what about changing the conditions?
Right. So true. It's so true. I think that's just a generational thing that's passed on from generation to
Hmm.
generation to generation, is that you just white knuckle through it.
Hmm.
If there's not an easy answer that is known, then you just deal with it until it heals on its own, which it never
Which
does.
it never does.
Right. Or
Right.
you grin and bear it and pretend it isn't happening and suffer through it until you die. And it's
Yeah.
unfortunate because there's so many avenues out there, and not, it's not a one, it's not a one thing works for everybody or every
Hmm.
condition.
Yeah.
There's so
Absolutely.
many options out there. And I love the fact that coaching and metaphysicality and, all this holistic stuff is really starting to get out into society more, and
Hmm.
that can have access to that, especially like you said, people who live in places that don't have access to it.
I'm sure people are very appreciative of you and your and your ability to serve and to heal
Thank you.
and educate about it, right? I think there's a huge gap in the sharing of knowledge and being able to and having people, like you said, be open and be able to hear it. Because a lot of times, depending on where you're located, people don't want to hear that kind of stuff. Like you said, we just rather white knuckle through it. It's not like you broke your leg, like you falling, you
Right.
out there doing some work and you break your leg, whatever. People will get a cast on their leg and they get right back to work if they have to.
Right.
I, would-
Right.
it's so
It's
crazy,
insane.
but yeah, it's so crazy.
What if personal growth wasn't meant to be a solo journey? What if the transformation you've been seeking isn't found in another self-help book, but can be found in a living, breathing ecosystem of growth? Welcome to the Becoming Human 2.0 Incubator, where conscious evolution meets authentic connection. Life isn't something that is just happening to you. It's calling you to step into something greater, to break through your limitations, to unlock your highest potential. But here's the truth. Transformation isn't meant to happen alone. Deep down, we all long for something more than self-improvement. We crave real human connection, a space where we are seen, understood, and supported in our evolution. That's why we created the Becoming Human 2.0 Incubator, a high-frequency space where seekers, world changers, and conscious leaders come together to evolve. Integrating our Becoming Human 2.0 blueprint, we merge science, ancient wisdom, and personal mastery to create deep, lasting transformation. Your journey? The 3 phases of evolution. Discover who are you and why are you here. Gain clarity, expand your awareness, and reconnect with your highest self. Awaken. Step into mastery. Optimize your heart, mind, body, and spiritual energy. Align with your purpose. Evolve. Embody your highest and true self. Sustain transformation. Live in flow and create meaningful impact. This isn't just another course, and it's not just another community. It's something much deeper. A space with purpose, a tribe, a living, breathing ecosystem of transformation, guided by the 5 pillars of human alchemy and the 7 domains of personal mastery. Here's what makes the incubator unique. A personalized, science-backed roadmap or path for true transformation without the hype. A real, connected tribe of like-minded humans. not just another online group or activity-based community. Live coaching, expert mentorship, and energy-based practices. A fusion of modern science, ancient wisdom, and conscious alignment. And that is only the beginning. Now, you might be wondering if this is for you. So, if you're feeling stuck, disconnected, or craving a real path to mastery, if you know that you're meant for something greater, if you're feeling the call to help guide others in their personal journey, or if you're simply ready to evolve beyond limitations, then the Incubator is definitely for you. Special invitation founding members offer. The first 20 individuals to join will gain access at a special grandfather founding members rate. This is a one-time opportunity before these spaces are filled. Are you ready to step into your highest potential? Join the Becoming Human 2.0 Incubator today. Comment Evolve or click the link below to get started. The next version of you is waiting.
So
Yeah.
in the space that you're in, like there's so many things that make you delve into. You said you do some energy work and you get into the metaphysical. Tell me about the
Yes.
energy work. I think that's pretty interesting. I think I love energy work, but tell me a little bit about that.
Therapy and or acupressure. So I've
Mm,
never been trained with the needles, but I've been trained on exactly like where the needles go, what each point represents, all the meridians, everything. And
mm,
so I do it
mm,
just with my fingertips. And there's different ways to do it, but those are the two main ones that I find will help ground people, center people, will help the nervous system get to a point where it allows them to release or at least to feel something different so that they know something is there. And
yeah.
a lot of what I do with massage is if I do a combined hybrid, so I do a massage, energy work, coaching session all in one session on the table, then what I do is I do certain massage and energy work to help bring things to the surface and then
Mm,
coach people through it at the same time. And so
mm,
energy work itself can just, oh, it's amazing. It is amazing how the body reacts to energy.
mhm,
Just don't even, it's not even necessarily the physical touch. I'll be honest, I didn't believe in energy work when I went to massage therapy school, when I started school. I only went through it because it was something that I had to take and I thought it was
mm,
frou-frou and I'm like, whatever. Okay, well, I'll take it, I'll do it, I'll pass the class. And I started having experiences in the class, both working on other students and having them work on me, where there were shifts in me, either in
yeah,
my body physically or in my energy or in my thinking. And I was like, whoa, there's something to this.
yeah,
There really is. And it's something
yeah.
that I've integrated into my work for 23 years.
Oh, I just love it. I love it when people share examples because I do a lot of talking with individuals and I say, I'm an energetic being having this physical experience. I said, but you understand that we are energy. We emit energy. There's electromagnetic field that we interact with, not only around us, but in this ether, the space that we're in, and that we have the ability to have impact on other people
Yes.
based on what frequencies we're putting out into the field. And the frequencies I'm talking about is our own energetic fields, our emotional frequencies, and those go out on an electromagnetic field, and those can have an interaction with you, whether you and I are sitting here together or whether we're sitting on video, which is another thing that's really intriguing too, because the energy, we're seeing each other. We're obviously watching. Energy happens in order for us to be able to see each other on the video, right? But that energy passing in the real time with us in the space that we're in is also passing too. So
Yeah.
if we're connecting, we're connecting. We don't have to wait for it to go around the planet. It's right there.
Right. Right. I love that.
So
It's and not only can we affect each other, we can also repel or attract things to ourselves
yes.
just by our
Mhm.
language, just by how we speak, you know? I know a lot of times I heard something by Mel Robbins the other day, but I know a lot of people have spoken about this and she's like, don't say I have depression, say I am depressed because if you're or don't say I am depressed. I'm so sorry I said that backwards. Don't say I am depressed, say I have depression or
Mhm.
an ailment or something like that because you're taking on that as your identity, as who you are, and then you pull that energy in of just the
Yeah.
depression, and that's what you see around you. And I lived 30 years that way of my life is horrible. Nothing ever works out for me. Why doesn't anything go right? And that's all that
Mhm.
I ever saw. And that's all that was attracted to me. And as soon
Yes.
as I learned about, hey, who am I being? I'm being somebody who says, this is who I am,
Yes.
And then
Yes.
when you're around somebody else and you're saying, I am this person who's giving and serving, I am this person who wonderful things happen to me. And then people are around you or they're interacting with you and they're like, oh, I feel that.
Mhm.
And they can take that on too. And it's an amazing, it's just like generational trauma, how that gets passed down, not by word of mouth. It's all by energy. We can absolutely offset anything in this world by positive energy. Like you said, in person, across the world from each other on video. It's,
Mhm.
it's amazing. It's
It's
amazing.
amazing. I was talking to a gentleman a couple weeks ago, and he said something really interesting that really landed. And I've shared it with a couple people, but it brought what you just said brought it back to me. Is that we identify ourselves with our emotional experience, and like you said,
Yes.
I'm depressed, or I'm this, or I have anxiety, or whatever that is, or I was victimized when I was a child, or I was victimized, or this happened to me, and those experiences lead to right now. And as much as we want to take many of those experiences away, if you hadn't gone through those experiences, like for example, you and me, I mean, I've gone through my experiences too. If I hadn't had those situations all happen and work through all that stuff that's happened in the past, we wouldn't be sitting right here talking to each other right now. Change
Exactly.
one thing from the past and then we're not meeting, right?
Yep.
So those things needed to happen to allow this to happen right now. But the
Exactly.
even deeper piece of that was that, we are designed to have the experience. We're supposed to feel pain and joy and sorrow and gratitude and love and hate and all the things in between all of those, right? But we don't
Right.
have to become those.
Right.
And when we become those, then we're choosing to suffer.
Yes. I have
And,
go ahead. Sorry.
no, go ahead. No, go ahead. No, I was, yeah, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
I have a friend who says all the time, observe, don't absorb.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I acknowledge, one, that's a tough pill to swallow.
Mm-hmm.
Two, I realize it's easier said than done. We're
So true.
humans. We're
So
humans, right? And we've got programming from the age of 0 to 7 that is really has been running the show, no matter how old we are, until we become aware of it and until we install new programs.
right.
And I've used this metaphor before, and I'll share it because I think it's interesting. Like we have all these programs running, and typically what happens is we don't have any awareness of the programs, and they run. So 7, 8, 9, 10, 13, 16, 18, same program running when we were 5, but it's still running. 21, 25, 30, same programs running from at age 7.
Right.
Then you get a new program, and someone gives you some awareness. And here you got new software. You could get an upgrade right now if you download the program,
Right.
install it, and then actually use it. But typically what we do is we say, here's the awareness, and we download the program, but we never double click to execute it. And then if we do double click, we don't open it up and use it. And it's like, wow, we have so much opportunity to not suffer. And it happens with all of us in our own time. It's not like it has to happen now. When I look at this conversation, we're not saying anybody's doing something bad or that you should have done it sooner. And all these. That's not
Right.
the statement here. It's like, now that you're aware, that means you have the ability to choose to do something different. You don't have to live in this space. You don't have to take ownership of this and take on the persona and the label of being someone who was XYZ or whatever happened. Right?
Right.
That happened. I grew stronger from that. And now I'm this.
Right. Right. And I think part of the block with some people is that it is not easy. Once you get
Mhm.
that awareness, you're like, oh, now I've got to do something with this. And doing something with it is hard. It is not easy at all. But that's where we have community of people. That's where we have coaches. That's where we have
Mhm.
metaphysicalists. That's where we have people who are there to catch our blind spots, because sometimes even with that new programming, we don't always see it. I had a client recently who was so angry at his father because his father never saved him from the bullies that he experienced when he was in elementary and middle school. And he was bullied pretty horribly. And then later in a conversation, probably about a month later, we were having a conversation and he's just like, yeah, I needed to be a man and I couldn't tell my dad anything. And I'm like, wait a second. You're mad that your father didn't protect you, but you didn't tell your father anything. And he had never put that together. He had never realized that he was, in that respect, was speaking out of both sides of his mouth, because he had two different realities that were experienced with the bullies and his father. The one
Yeah.
was his dad didn't protect him. The other one was like, no, I had to be a man. And I'm like, how could your dad protect you if he didn't know? And in that point, he was finally able to give his father some grace, because he was like, oh, he didn't know, so he couldn't protect me. And so it's just these blind spots that we have, every once in a while we all have them, even the best of us, even those of us who are in this world and have been in this world for decades, we still have shortcomings. We still have blind spots. And it's
That's
all
right.
about having those around us to just recognize those and then do something with it.
Do something with it. Yeah, that's a great story. I imagine that it happens more often than not for a lot of people. I think I've had a similar conversation, and I think it always comes down to, did they know? Did you communicate that?
Yes.
And typically, I would say 90% of the time, the answer is no. How did you expect them to realize that and pick up on that if you never said anything? Then there's that whole resistance. Well, they just should have known. They should have been able to read it in me and been able to look at me and tell. It's not always that easy to read people. I mean, there's certainly people that are more socially perceptive than others, but even the best of us, I mean, and I'll say this, I'll share this because this is personal. I've had two people in my life commit suicide. And on the surface, you would say, I should have known. I've known this person for X number of years, but you don't know.
Right.
You don't know.
Right.
And no matter how socially perceptive you are. So how can you be blaming someone for something they didn't do in the past when they didn't know and you feel like they should have been able to tell, when that's a very difficult thing to do, even for the most socially perceptive person?
It's so true. I had somebody tell me the other day, and I think it was from a video that they had watched where this person had a friend and he found out after the fact that his friend had been going through a really, really difficult time. And he's like, why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you share this with me? Why didn't you reach out to me? Like, I want to serve you. And she said, I did. I sent you a text. And so he's going through his phone and he's like, where's the text? Like, what? And she said, it's on this day. And it said, do you want to come over? And he's like, how is that different from any other text that you sent me?
Right.
Asking if
Mhm.
he goes, I had no way of knowing. So I think sometimes we think that we show things that the other person should pick up on.
Yes.
And it just is so similar to how we are. I think there's probably a little bit of masking in there. There's a bit of, I don't want to be a bother, so we're just going to minimize it. And,
Mhm.
we never really know what's going on with other people. No matter how
Mhm.
obvious it seems.
Yeah. I mean, in their mind, they think they've told everybody, they've yelled it to the top of their lungs to the highest mountaintop.
Right.
But there's one thing that we perceive that we communicate. There's the other thing that what the other person has received.
Yeah.
And there's a gap. I mean, certainly there's a communication thing. But when I think about connections, friendships, relationships, it makes me wonder sometimes. And I mean, I do work with relationships and I talk about it from a neuroscientific perspective where
Mhm.
how people engage with one another. And it's just the interpersonal dance, in a relationship. One of the reasons why I wanted to start this show is I felt like people have a hard time connecting, particularly post COVID, but before COVID, people were having a hard time connecting then too. But now it's been really exacerbated, to the point where we've pretty much kind of, I argue that we've lost the art of connection in really having meaningful conversation and being able to be authentic with one another and be honest with one another in a way that is compassionate, of course, but there's still honesty, right? And we struggle with that. I mean, you start looking at some of the statistics, and I don't want to quote any numbers because I don't want to be wrong, but But at the same token, because like I said, I don't know what we're going to talk about, so I don't have that stuff sitting here in front of me.
Right.
But when you start looking at people in relationships, people not in relationships, people being lonely, those numbers have all increased significantly over the last 4 or 5 years than where they were
Sure.
before.
Sure.
And depression rates are up. I mean, so there's definitely something going on with our ability to connect and communicate with other human beings. And I feel like we need to bring some of that back, but I think that people don't see it demonstrated, so they don't know how to.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think a lot of it has to do with my experiences. Like you can communicate something with me and you feel like you're screaming at me, but my experiences throughout my life, I may not recognize that,
Hmm.
So it's we've all gotten into our own little cocoons,
Yeah.
with COVID, and now we're all just trying to fight our way out and be like, oh, how do I make a friend? How do I talk to people?
Yeah.
How do I?
Um, yeah, I find the experience where I feel like people feel like they're more connected because of social media
Yeah.
than they are in their physical world, but yet, and I just had this conversation the other day with someone, and he made a very good point. He's like, people feel like they're really connected in social media, but they're not connected.
Yeah.
I can watch on social media that something happened to you or your family, or you're sick or whatever. He said, did I pick up the phone and call you? I'm your friend, right? I've been connected to you for how long? 6, 7, 8, 10 years? And you just told me a family member was sick. Yet I didn't feel compelled to call. Are we really that connected? And
Yeah.
he brought up a very valid point, because the people that are closest to me, if you let me know that something's going on with you, I'm gonna pick the phone up,
Right.
right? I'm gonna pick the phone up. And so, are we really that connected?
You
I
know, it's
I I don't
so
know.
it's very true. Like that's something I hadn't even thought of recently. Like I love that awareness of, how many I'm assuming you and I are probably in the same generation. When we were kids, how many phone numbers could we recite off the top of our head? Right? We knew
Or
everybody's.
at least 10, 15. It was everybody in the family. You knew everybody. You knew every family member's phone number. You knew your phone number. You knew your mom's and dad's. If you had both parents, you knew their work numbers. You knew your grandparents' numbers. You knew if you had any aunts and uncles, you knew all their numbers
Yeah.
for sure,
We
and your friends.
exactly.
And your friends.
And nowadays, if I wanted to call somebody and I didn't have my phone with me, couldn't do it. Couldn't do it.
Yeah.
I mean, that right there to me is just such a lack of connection as you talk about handwritten letters where you were invested in writing somebody by hand and taking the time and sending them a letter and receiving those was the greatest thing in the world. And now, we do so much by computers. I think it would be such a grounding experience if we could get rid of social media worldwide for a week. And I think people would lose their minds and then they would figure out what to do and they would figure out how to connect with people.
Yeah. Huh. I, you just remind me what happened with TikTok. On one hand, I was like, what if TikTok had stayed down for a week? I mean, and then
Right.
they hear the fantasy about how it all got resolved. It's like, that's a fantasy. Stop with the fantasies. I mean, come on, that's not how it went down. I mean, but I think but there's such a play on individuals' awareness, right? When you're not tuned in, and I'm not going to say like, oh, well, we're above, or I'm better than anybody else. It's not that. But when you're not really paying attention and
Yeah.
you're just kind of self-absorbed, you can't see the things that are happening right in front of your eyes. And I think that a lot of times people see what they want to see, and
Yes.
and there's a little bit of there's always perception. Get that, but that's why, eyewitness accountings aren't really that valid, and even like in the court of law anymore, because we all see what we are seeing in that present moment, unless we're present with the moment, right? If we're not present with the moment and we're just kind of on the peripheral in the space, we don't see exactly what was going on over there because we weren't paying attention to that. We're paying attention to the thing right here, or with ourselves, or we were inside our head thinking about them. So we see
Right.
what we want to see, and we're easily suggestible. I mean, there's certainly been many studies that have been put out there about conformity and how the general population will conform to whatever the authority says is true. I mean, they've done many studies on that. We're dating back to the 50s, right after World War II. And it's just amazing how some of that information is just, we don't, I don't know what it is. I don't know if we just don't take it seriously. I don't know if we think it's true for us, and maybe it's ego driven. I'm not really sure, but
Yeah.
look, 74% of people will conform to whatever the authority says. If the
Yep.
authority says to do it, the 74% will do it without asking any questions. Even if what they're hearing sounds completely ludicrous, they'll still
Right.
do it. They'll still do it. And because they don't have any accountability because someone told them to do it. And you can usually tell when that's the case when they say, I'm being told to tell you X, Y, and Z. I'm absolving myself of responsibility. I'm not the one going to be held accountable for this. It's another person. And that might all be true. And you might be just a messenger. But wow, we conform so easily. It's amazing. But I agree with you. That's what some of these retreat experiences are for the quote unquote digital detox. But without going on a retreat, I think we would be better served if we took a digital detox individually, or I would like to see it done collectively. Turn it all off for 2 weeks and see what happens. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like you said, people go crazy. They lose their minds.
I've seen stories where parents have like shut the internet off for their home for a week, and they said at first their kids just did not know what to do with themselves.
Mm.
And after a couple of days, they're like, oh, we could read actual books. We don't have to have a
They
computer,
can
or
read books.
we can draw. We can
Mm.
do, there's so many things that you can do. I remember when I was a teenager going on a TV fast for a month, and did I miss
Mm.
TV? Absolutely. But there was so much that I could do that, I mean, again, things weren't as accessible. Like we would have to make mixtapes and wait for the song to come on the radio and hit the record button.
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
You know, at the same time, without that, if we went back to simplicity like that, how much more would we be aware of our surroundings? How much easier would it be to connect because we'd be aware of what is going on? I
What
think
is going on?
when you mentioned presence, which is really interesting because the person there was Jim, his name was Jim, and he and I spoke together on the stage
Mm.
at this conference last week. And our topic was the power of presence. And few times that we had spoken before this event to really kind of get on the same page of what we were going to speak about, we realized that presence, there's so many definitions. Like each person has their own definition of presence and how it can be so positive. Like you can be present to what's happening in a spiritual realm. You can be present to what's happening in a physical realm, in a mental realm, but you can also be completely present to your own self and ignore everything that's going on
Everything
around.
else.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And it can be powerful in a positive and powerful in a negative way. And just depending on the circumstance.
It depends on the circumstance. I think there needs to be some normalization or some, I don't know what it looks like, but I had this conversation with someone else around vocabulary, like what things mean.
Oh gosh.
Because we all have these different interpretations of what certain words mean. And it's almost like you have to have a conversation to kind of level set on what, hey, we're going to talk about this. And when I say this is what I mean by this, right? And
Yes.
then kind of have an agreement on the words that we use. I don't think we don't do that enough. And without getting everybody on the same language, which I think that's probably what the entire attempt was with languages and having people learn certain languages. And I mean, everybody seems to know English, but English is not the same in every part of the world.
Oh my goodness, no.
Um, I've been in many countries, and and English is not the same, and depends what English someone learned, and how they
Yeah.
interpret that. And a lot of times people will translate English into their language and then make a translation back, and there might be a mistranslation in the conversion going back and forth. So it doesn't always necessarily mean the same thing just because everybody speaks the same language. So vocabulary, meaning, I feel like those things are just as important as presence, right? And I think you're spot on. I hadn't really thought about it that way, but you're right. I mean, there's different ways to be present, and maybe we should be talking about this, what we mean by presence.
Yeah. Yeah,
Mhm.
absolutely. Presence can be such a beautiful thing. It can be life changing. Like was able to share stories about how a moment where I was present and not aware of it, because I've always been depressed or anxious thinking about my future. I get anxious thinking about my past. I was depressed. And I just happened to, in this moment, without even being conscious of it, to be totally focused on just what was going on in front of me, which was this beautiful occurrence. And at the same time, there was another man in the room who was very present to the fact that I needed something. I needed a hug, and I wasn't even aware of it. And his intuition kicked in, and he immediately said, I'm going to follow this, grabbed two other men, came and gave me a hug, and it changed my life. And it took 11 months for me to really understand it was just a hug, but what that meant to me and how it changed my life. And it healed a core wound of mine from when I was 10 years old. And I'm like, that is powerful. Like and I think a big part of this too is the length of time between thought and action. I think that's another part of being present. And one of my goals is to decrease that time between when you think and when you act. And, he was able to be present, and something downloaded for him, and he was like, do this now. And so he's like, okay, I'm going to do this now. And it can change lives. It can change lives. It can help us connect. It can help us heal one another. It can help us see those blind spots. And it's a beautiful thing if we just step into it.
What do you do for yourself? Like, you're a healer, right? And so I know that sometimes we can be really, really giving, give. And then sometimes we can get drained.
Yeah.
All
We'll do
right.
that once.
What do you do? How do you find stillness yourself? What do you do to find stillness?
Personally, for me, it's stepping back and seeing where I'm giving too much, sometimes it'll be to my own detriment because I'll be sacrificing my time. I have a client call that's supposed to be 90 minutes, and 2.5 hours later, I'm like, no, they need me, and I'm just wiped, but I'm like, oh, and I have to step back and I have to set those boundaries for myself. But then I really have to get grounded, and I have to almost do a restart. So I try and do meditation every morning. So I do either exercise or meditation every morning. And if it's one of these times where I need to restart, I'll make sure that it's meditation. And then I will do a lot of literal just grounding and either be out in nature, or if I have to do it in my home, it's 15 degrees outside where I'm at right now. So I'll do it in my house, but I'll get my bare feet on the carpet and I will start grounding and just try and tune in to where I'm giving too much and to find those blind spots myself and say, oh, I've been giving too much time to these people, or I've been letting my clients go over, or my massage, sessions have been lasting much longer than they should. Where do I need to set those boundaries for myself? And then just step back into those boxes of here's the boundary.
Yeah. I have some friends and folks in my community that have taken digital detoxes. I'm off of social media for the next 2 weeks. I'm like, good for you. And I think that was one of the main themes about got to get back to being grounded, got to get back to feeling like myself and tuning into me and what I need. And I think I said something to the effect of, well, you can't really serve the people that are most important to you if you're not taking care of yourself. So you shouldn't feel guilty about taking time. And this person didn't feel guilty, but in general, people shouldn't feel guilty, particularly if they're there to serve other people. And that's what they do a majority of the time. You're serving someone else, you're healing someone else or other people, or you're just there you have a lot of responsibility for people. And so you want to show up as your best, you got to take care of yourself so you can be the best version of yourself when you're working with those individuals or greeting the people that are most important to you.
Very true.
Yeah. I love it. Meditation and movement. I love it.
Meditation. And one of those things I didn't believe in until I started doing all this energy work. And I was like, oh, wait, this makes a difference. This is a great thing.
Yeah.
I heard a quote yesterday, actually. Somebody said, you either serve from your gift or your talent, or you serve from your exhaustion. And you know what? That may not have been the exact quote, but that was the thought behind it. If you can't serve from an empty cup. So if I'm serving from exhaustion, am I really serving?
Oh,
you
you're really
know?
serving. Yes.
Yeah.
That resonates. I think that when you're working in your gift, when you're working in your passion, then that work is love in physical form.
S-
But you also got to love yourself too. I mean, and you
Oh,
do have to be charged. And like you said, you do have to fill your cup. I mean, you can't pour from an empty cup.
right.
There's no other way to look at that. But that means you had to fill your cup up and do the things that give you the energy to continue doing what you do. I find it quite interesting when people say you were just talking about the meditation thing. And I find so much, and I've been teaching meditation for a decade.
100.
And I've been a long-term practitioner. And I always tell people, I find that the people who respond the best to meditation are people who have gotten some kind of formalized training in meditation. Not to say that the other methodologies don't work. I find that the ones that stick with it over longer periods of time or consistently are ones that have had some kind of accountability that was built in. You're not just looking at the reminder on your phone because you know what? I get so many notifications on this phone.
Oh,
It's
goodness.
ridiculous.
Yes.
Even when I got it on do not disturb, you know, but it's like we get all these notifications. I mean, I don't need another notification telling me to do something. But what I need to do is be able to, and this goes back to the stillness. When you have to go someplace to learn to get support or learn how to do that activity, there is no notification, there is no phone ringing, there is none of that. You're going to get still because you're in a different environment. And
Yes.
but and you learn how to meditate first, and then you can find yourself integrating in the environment. I can sit in the middle of a town square or at a metro center and get into a meditation, and everybody else disappears.
Yes.
But I don't know if I could do that if I was trying to do it the other way around, like trying to learn how to meditate in all the noise. I think would be very difficult for someone to try
Yeah.
to undertake. And I can imagine why people think meditation is so difficult. I think the other part too, I think people kind of misinterpret what meditation is and what it means.
So true.
Mhm. What was the breakthrough for you?
Do you know, I didn't think I could meditate for many, many, many years because I have ADHD and my brain just
Mm,
doesn't shut down. And my
mm,
interpretation of it was you had to you had to clear your mind completely. You know,
mhm.
it's kind of like the Ghostbusters movie where they're like clear mind and the one guy
Yeah,
couldn't. He had to think of the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man. And I'm like, I've got
yeah.
50 Stay Puft Marshmallow Man in my head all times. Like I can't. But somebody said something to me about it's not about clearing your mind, it's about focusing, and he was like, "I don't care if you draw a spider on the wall and you sit on the other side of the room and you stare at that spider that drawing of that spider the entire time." And
Mhm,
he goes, "But if you can get yourself to focus on something, that is where meditation is in play. That is
mhm,
meditation because you're and then you can take whatever you want to focus on and you
mhm,
can meditate and focus on that. And that was the shift for me where I was like, oh, I don't have to get rid of everything. I actually need to bring something into my head. Now I
mhm,
do have to quiet all the other noise, and there's different ways
mhm,
to do that. And it was
mhm,
hard. It was really hard, even with being taught how to do it. It still took me quite a while to
mhm,
understand how it worked for me. But once it did, I was like, this is where it's at, man. If I want to
mhm.
find answers out that are not settling very well inside of me, I just need to quiet all the noise. And I just need
That's right.
to get in a space where I can speak to myself. And
Mm.
that's what shifted everything for me. Mm,
Yeah, I love that. That's what it is. It's directing your attention to whatever it is that you're going to focus on. There's so many different ways to meditate. I've typically told people, so you just got to find the meditation style that resonates with you and just stick with it. I mean, for some people, it's going to be focused on the breath. For some people, it's going to be focused on something external. For some people, it's going to be focusing on something internal. For other people, it's going to be a mantra. It's going to be whatever it's going to be for each individual, but it's the consistency that is where the benefits lie.
yeah.
And then you said you had ADHD, that, or at least you have that, but how does the meditation help with that?
It allows me to calm my brain. It allows,
Mhm.
there's times where it just feels like it's going and going and going and going, and I overwhelm myself because I'm like,
Yeah.
"Oh, I have to do this, and I need to do this, and look at my phone, there's everything on here, and then here's the list that I've written here," and and it's just and then people are calling, and you've got emails coming, and there's times where I overwhelm myself
Mhm.
by feeling like I have to get everything done. And it allows me to put things into correct perspective. Allows me to make a new list. I'm a list person, and allows me to make a new list, but say, this is what needs to be done now. This can wait. This
Mhm.
can wait even longer. And I only need to focus on these 3 things instead of these 27 things, you
Right.
know?
Right.
So
I love it.
it's
I
amazing.
love it. Yeah. Well, I know we're close to time, and so I want to respect yours, but I've been having such a great conversation with you. We could certainly talk some more.
I would love
So
that.
I'd love to have you back another time. So certainly do raise your hand again. I'd love to have you back on the show. What's the one takeaway if you think about everything we've talked about? And I know we talked about a lot of things, uh, but if you think about everything we've been talking about, what's the one thing you'd want the listeners to take away from this conversation?
I think the thing that I would like people to take away would be just be open to whatever there is. Because, when I worked with my first coach, I misunderstood what coaching was. I thought it was kind of like a PA, like somebody who wanted to be a therapist, but they didn't want to go to school the whole time. And so I
Yeah.
was like, if 3 professional therapists can't help me, this coach isn't going to be able to help me. And when I promised a friend I would talk to him a couple times when we started working together, I thought he was crazy. I was like, what this guy thinking? But I'm like, okay, I'll just go with it. I promised somebody I would do it. And it turned out that his unorthodox method is what worked for my brain to allow
Mm.
me to go in and to pull up these events and this trauma and process it. And so I really have learned to be open to whatever there is out there and not judge any method or any modality, anything before we really give it a fair chance. Because there's so many things out there that just seem unorthodox, but
Yeah.
they're so helpful in helping you to create a new you, a you that doesn't
Mm.
suffer anymore, a you that can let go of
Mm.
anything that you've been carrying and just allow yourself to be free. And it's an amazing, amazing feeling.
I love that. And with that, we'll bring
Thank you.
this to a close. Carrie, thank you so much for your thoughts, your insights, your perspective, for being open in this conversation. And like I said, I'd love to have you back. And everyone else, let's all remember that we're all here to discover, awaken, and evolve together. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Appreciate it.